On today's show, we preview the biggest weekend of this year's college football season, Georgia and Tennessee, a top three matchup, then LSU and Alabama. Then we're going to cover a historic NFL trade deadline from this past Tuesday. Stay tuned for it all. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, give us a 5-star rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts, and I'll cue the intro. What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the Raw Prospect Podcast. This is episode 133, going over the NFL trade deadline, college football, and NFL picks. Joining me from Austin, Texas, the Stat King himself, Mr. Michael Wien. What's up?
Make sure to like and subscribe to our channel. Share it with your friends who love sports. We have a huge episode today. An unexpectedly busy trade deadline on Tuesday in the NFL. A record 10 teams were involved in trades on the last day of the trade deadline. That is an NFL record. So it was a very busy day in the NFL trade deadline. And we had a huge weekend, particularly in college football, with two humongous matchups in the SEC. Just a couple announcements. First of all, keep an eye out for more content coming this weekend, hopefully a basketball episode where we'll talk about this Brooklyn Nets fiasco, some of the surprises and disappointments in the NBA so far, along with getting into our college basketball preview. Look out for that. And just a couple things here. First of all, if you told the fan base of Philadelphia sports that at the start of November, the Philadelphia Eagles were going to be undefeated, 7-0, would be playing a standalone Thursday night game against the Houston Texans in Houston, with a really good chance, in my opinion, to go to 8-0 on the season, and that nobody would really be talking about that because of what's going on across the way in Philadelphia with the Philadelphia Phillies, who were 22-29 at one point at the end of May, who had just fired their manager, Joe Girardi, but are now tied at 2 with a critical, huge Game 5 tonight against Justin Verlander, who, in my opinion, is pitching for his World Series legacy tonight. If you would have told me that the Eagles would be undefeated with a good chance to stay undefeated, playing a standalone Thursday night game, but no one would be talking about that because the Phillies are in the World Series in a dogfight with the Astros in a series that looks like it's bound to go 7 games at this point. I think Philly fans would have laughed at you, quite frankly, if we were having this conversation in April and May. And then second of all, before we get into everything, and this, I guess, will be a good transition into our college football preview. I'm not sure for the rest of the regular season, college and pro. I'm not talking about playoffs or the college football playoff or even bowl season and conference championship games. But for the rest of the regular season, I'm not sure I will get as excited for an individual game as I am for this weekend's game between Tennessee and Georgia. I'm just not sure I will. Maybe if Michigan and Ohio State are still undefeated in the last week of the regular season, maybe that will be a close second because that game will be huge as well. But I still think this one takes the cake. For the rest of the regular season, it's going to be hard for me to get as excited for individual regular season matchup, college or pro. Not talking about the playoffs because that's different. But this game right here has the potential to be the game of the past decade, in my opinion. So let's just get right into it. We have the number 1 Tennessee Volunteers in the college football playoff rankings the first rankings that came out on Tuesday. At number 3, Georgia Bulldogs. Georgia, playing at home, deservedly so, is favored. 8.5, in my opinion, is a little bit too much, but they are at home. This is only Tennessee's third true road game so far this season. They haven't really been truly tested on the road within the conference. So I think it is fair that Georgia is favored here. What are you looking for in this matchup, and who do you think is going to win and why?
Well, first things first is how does this Tennessee defense hold up against this really explosive Georgia offense? I think that's one of the things that's going under the radar here because, you know, Stetson Bennett may not be the flashiest guy in the world, but don't get it twisted. This Georgia offense is as good as any in the country at the moment. And really, that's going to be the matchup that I think decides this game. I think this Tennessee offense has proven that they're good enough to get theirs against anybody in the country. But the way their defense responds and is able to hold up, I think that's going to be what decides the game, particularly on the line of scrimmage. If Tennessee can stop the run and make Stetson Bennett, throw on 3rd and 8s, 3rd and 9s, 3rd and long situations where those Tennessee, defensive ends can just pin their ears back and rush the passer with no regard for the run game at all, then that really changes things because then Tennessee can really dictate the pace of the game and the overall feel of the game and get that crowd out of it in a way. So that's to me the first thing and most important thing about this game. How does the Tennessee defensive line hold up? How does that defense hold up in general? And Tennessee just has to get it to the fourth quarter. I think there's a lot of times where you see Georgia go on huge runs and say first, second, third quarter, but Tennessee just has to be able to survive those, and they'll be right there at the end, in my opinion.
First thing I want to talk about are these Tennessee receivers, Jalen Hyatt, Cedric Tillman, who's just returned from injury, and then the USC transfer, Brew McCoy, who originally committed to Texas, but the 5-star younger guy. This trio is arguably, in my opinion, the best trio in college football at the wide receiver position, and they match up against a very good physical Georgia secondary with Hendon Hooker, who's about as hot at the quarterback position as you can potentially be in college football. And if he wins this game, I think, in my opinion, may end up running away with the Heisman Trophy just because of what Tennessee has accomplished up to this point this season. The reason I think that the College Football Playoff Committee ranked Tennessee number 1 over Georgia is because of the strength of schedule up until this point. Tennessee has a road win at a good Pittsburgh team early in the season when we didn't know really what this Tennessee team was going to be. They were tested early on in a non-conference road game, which not a lot of these teams love to play early on. We know Georgia, looking back on it now, has that, huge victory at the beginning of the season against a really good Oregon team that didn't look like it at the time, but is now a really good Oregon team that's playing some of the best football in the country right now with Bo Nix, the Auburn transfer. But Tennessee, you got a win over Florida. You have a win over Bama. You have a win over LSU. I think Tennessee, so far to this point, has better strength of wins than Georgia. I think that's fair to say, and I think that's why they're ranked right now ahead of Georgia. But heading into this game, I think with only your third true road game of the season, Tennessee has not seen an environment like this. I mean, that place is going to be ready from the get-go down in Athens. And I'm watching for this Georgia secondary, how they match up against the trio, the 3-headed monster that is Cedric Tillman, that is Jalen Hyatt, who has 14 touchdown receptions already this season. It kind of reminds me of what Jamar Chase was able to do in that season back at LSU, where he was just going off week after week after week. And I think he's able to do that because Tennessee, what do they like to do? They like to stretch the field horizontally, and then once they've stretched you enough horizontally, they hit you over the top with the explosive plays. And so I'm looking at Kelly Ringo, who had a huge national championship game with that huge interception at the cornerback position. Potentially could be another first-round draft pick off that Georgia defense this upcoming year. Christopher Smith, the safety, and the other guys on the other side. How does Tennessee choose to attack the cornerback opposite Kelly Ringo? That's where this Georgia secondary has sort of struggled. They've had to rotate some guys in and out right there. How do they match up against Cedric Tillman? How do they match up against Brew McCoy? Because right now, I think most of the attention should be going to, and rightfully so, towards Jalen Hyatt, who has over 230 more yards than the next leading receiver in the SEC. He's been that good, and he has 14 touchdowns. So, number one, how do they match up? Opposite Kelly Ringo, who I think is going to be fine, whoever he matches up against. And how do they tackle in space? When Tennessee throws those screen passes out towards the perimeter, you have to be able to make tackles in space if you're a Kirby Smart defense that I think will be well coached and ready to play. I'm not questioning their ability to do that, but that's something Georgia has to do well. That Alabama really didn't do all that well when they matched up a couple weeks ago, and Tennessee won that game. So if we're looking at the best matchup, in my opinion, to watch, it's these Tennessee receivers against the Georgia secondary. But at the same time, you look at this Georgia offense going up against this Tennessee defense. I think a lot of the same applies. For the Tennessee defense, that's not particularly all that great. You can move the ball in between the 20s, and I think this Georgia offense will have success doing so. But if you're Tennessee, your focus has to be getting stops in the red zone. You have to be able to hold. I think it goes both ways. I think this game could come down to red zone efficiency, scoring touchdowns in the red zone, and not necessarily settling for field goals. But if you're Georgia, you got to be able to score in the red zone, and you got to use Brock Bowers. I think he's the best, by far the best tight end in the country. Made some unbelievable plays last week and in weeks past. How do they utilize? I think he can be a weapon, particularly against these Tennessee linebackers who have at some points this year struggled in pass coverage and also struggled making open field tackles. So for Georgia, attack them with your run game. Use Brock Bowers and Stetson Bennett. Don't make the big mistake. But I think on the Georgia side, they're going to be able to move the ball with success. Offensive line's great. They can run the football. Establish that run game a little bit more early, and then go to what you do best, which is get Brock Bowers in the open field and let him make plays. And then make sure you don't settle for field goals in the red zone. And then from a Tennessee perspective, same thing. You got to score touchdowns when you get into the red zone against this Georgia defense. Threes aren't going to beat Georgia. It's going to have to be touchdowns. And stick to your formula and don't make the big mistake. For me, as I said at the beginning of this podcast, I think that the line's a little too big. I would definitely take Tennessee to cover the spread. I think it's going to be a fourth quarter game. They've shown they can compete with pretty much anyone in the country. They have the horses to do so. So I would take Tennessee to cover. Right now, I'm leaning Tennessee to actually win this game. And the reason why is because news this week that Georgia lost one of their best players defensively and their top pass rusher. I think his name is Nolan Smith, something along those lines. Forgive me if I messed that up. He's going to be out for the rest of the season with an injury. I think it's a torn pec. So I think that hurts Georgia to an extent defensively. Their ability to create pressure on Hendon Hooker is affected by that. And I just think this Tennessee offense sort of reminds me this Tennessee team sort of reminds me of the LSU team back a couple of years ago to an extent, where everything just might be lining up magically. You have a 6-year quarterback, a transfer from Virginia Tech and Hendon Hooker that no one really talked about, like Joe Burrow, until he got to LSU and is shooting up his draft stock. You have a bunch of talented receivers that are shooting up NFL draft boards. You have a defense who isn't necessarily all that great. That LSU defense is probably a little bit better, but that just has to hold their own and be good enough. I think there's a lot of similarities here between this Tennessee team and this and that LSU team. I'm going to pick Tennessee to win, though, because Georgia is missing a big piece on the defensive side of the football.
Okay, yeah, I think that's definitely a possibility. This game is kind of a coin flip, in my opinion. I'm leaning towards Georgia because of the home field advantage. I think either way, it's going to be a close game and a high scoring game, and that's more so in Tennessee's comfortable zone. They're more used to playing in these track meet, high scoring affairs. But I am going to go with Georgia. I just think all the experience they have on that team, as well as the depth at you know at offensive line, at defensive line. I think they'll be able to control the line of scrimmage a little bit better. And ultimately, I think they're going to win a close one. I think it might come down to one or two plays here and there, maybe a muff punt, a missed field goal here and there. And I just trust Georgia a little bit more because they've been in these situations. But I absolutely will be cheering for Tennessee just because I want to see new blood in the playoff this year.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a really great point. When great teams get together that are great on both sides of the ball, offense and defense, it can often be, and we've seen this, even in that Tennessee-Alabama game a couple weeks back, special teams can end up being the difference. A missed field goal here or there, a muff punt here or there, a dropped ball here or there, even penalties on the special teams, flipping field position, stuff like that. That can be the difference in a win or a loss in these type games. And this game has huge implications, not only for what the college football playoff could look like, but what that SEC championship is also going to look like. So we'll see. But the winner of this game is just setting themselves up awfully well for a berth to the college football playoff, no matter what happens in the SEC championship game, in my opinion. If Tennessee is able to win this game, their strength of record, even if they go on to maybe lose to Alabama, a team they already beat in the SEC championship game, I still think they get in. Same thing with Georgia. If they are able to win this game and say they, for some whatever reason, lose to Bama or whoever they end up facing in the SEC championship game, I still think they get in as a one-loss conference champion, or maybe not a conference champion. So it's a big game for both teams, but it's not the end-all be-all for either team either. So with that, we'll move on to the night game, which is going to be Alabama, a team that struggled on the road so far this season, dating back to last year even. But they're still Alabama, ranked number 6 in the country, with Bryce Young, who's an absolute witch, favored by almost 2 touchdowns at an LSU Brian Kelly coach team that's playing really good football right now in Death Valley in prime time. So what do you expect from this game, and who are you picking to win?
Well, to me, that 13.5-point spread is massive. I think these games, they tend to be, based on running the football, controlling the line of scrimmage, and ultimately who forces more turnovers defensively. These games don't tend to be track meets. I could be wrong on that. Obviously, these quarterbacks are dynamic for both teams, particularly with Bryce Young and this LSU kid who I can't think of his name right now, but has impressed me throughout this year. He's been really, really solid. The transfer from Arizona State, I believe. I think LSU has been coming together as a team, and the locker room is buying in. And I think that's the most important part because the talent is absolutely there. So, first and foremost, I just want to make it clear that I'm going to pick LSU to cover the spread. Um, but the other side of this is I just think Alabama knows what they have to do. They know they have to right the ship to have any chance of making it to the college football playoff or even just the SEC championship game. So they know what's at stake. And I'm just going to go ahead and trust Nick Saban to get these guys ready to go. I know they've struggled on the road, and this game is really no different. It's going to be maybe just as tough as what that Tennessee game was. Maybe even tougher just because of how rabid those LSU fans are. But I just think um, Bryce Young, his playmaking ability, his ability to just create outside of the pocket is going to be the difference in the game, in my opinion. So I'm going to pick Alabama in a close one.
This is interesting. You have a 2-loss LSU team that's playing really well. You mentioned the play of Jaden Daniels. What he's been able to do with his legs this season, and we knew that coming in. As a transfer from Arizona State, that's his strength, getting outside the pocket, making plays with his legs. But where he's really made strides, and give credit to their coaching staff and Brian Kelly for this, is down the field to these playmakers on the outside like Kayshon Boutte and the other guys that they have. The issue with LSU has never been talent. It's always been, we had the whole Ed Orgeron saga that fell apart after they won the national championship game. It's always been off the field stuff, this and that, maybe some of the defensive issues not buttoned up enough. But Brian Kelly has his team playing really good football. We've seen Alabama struggle on the road. So for me, against the not-so-strong Alabama secondary, as we've seen, it's really struggled with Tennessee. They've struggled with Texas when they had Quinn Ewers in the game. They've struggled, countless times this year. Even didn't play so hot against a struggling Texas A&M offense. For me, Jaden Daniels, you got to continue to do what you've been doing. Make some plays downfield because that's really opened up the running game. And Alabama, when you have to think about, the quarterback in the run game, it makes it a whole lot harder for, that defensive front, which is the strength of this Alabama defense, to pin their ears back and sort of stack the box and guard against the run. They got to read the quarterback and what he's going to do. So continue to be yourself. Don't make mistakes early. If you're LSU, you want to get off to a fast start, and you don't want to make the critical mistake if you can. And if you're Bama, you got to eliminate the penalties. That can't be an issue this week. And you just got to let Bryce Young do his thing, in my opinion. I am going to lean Alabama. I still think this is a really good team that's getting a little bit too much shit in the media. A number 6 Alabama team that has something to really play for now, as if they lose this game, you have 2 losses. LSU has 2 losses. You're both in the SEC West, and now LSU has that tiebreaker. So you do not want to lose this game. And if you're Alabama, you've got to be laser focused because next week you're going at Ole Miss. So this is really the 2-week stretch that's going to decide whether or not Bama not only can keep its chances alive for a potential college football playoff berth, but also keep its chances alive to get to the SEC championship game. Because if they lose to LSU, that's going to make it really tough. Having a test at Ole Miss next week, and then they'll finish the season. They'll win their last 2 games against Austin, PA, and Auburn. But these are the 2 weeks that's going to decide your season for Alabama. And in my opinion, they're both on the road. So if you're Alabama, you got to fix those pre-snap mistakes in particular that have potentially cost you in some of these games and kept some of these games closer than they should be. So LSU will cover. I do think it'll be a one-possession game late in the fourth quarter, I'm hoping. But I do think Alabama will hold on to win.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm going to be cheering for LSU also in this game just because I'm all the way pro new blood in the playoff this year. I just really want to see something different. And it's not, it's not because the playoffs have been boring necessarily, but I just think it'd be fun to see some new blood in there. So, okay, that's going to do it for our college football segment. And now we're going to get into our NFL trade deadline segment. So, what we're going to be doing is just going over winners and losers of the trade deadline. We're each going to give like 3 or 4 teams, something like that. Go over the moves they made or the moves they didn't make in some of the teams' cases, and talk about what implications that has the rest of their season or even next season. So let's get right into this. Let's start with your winners. Who do you think won the trade deadline this year?
I'm going to start with the Minnesota Vikings, trading for TJ Hawkinson. I think this is a really great move. You get him, first of all, you get him from your division rival, the Detroit Lions. And he adds another element that they were missing, in my opinion, to this offense. I think after Bradley Chubb, you can make the argument he was the best player to get dealt at the trading deadline. Well, you can throw Roquan Smith in there as well, but on the offensive side, he was by far, I think, the best player, the most impact player to be dealt. They had a hole at the tight end position with the loss of Tyler Conklin, the struggles of Irv Smith, who's now out for the next 8 to 10 weeks with a high ankle sprain. And in my opinion, after Travis Kelce, after Mark Andrews, after George Kittle, TJ Hawkinson is right up there with the top tight ends in the entire league. And I think they'll be able to utilize him over the middle of the field. He'll become more of a weapon, take some of the pressure off Justin Jefferson. And I just like this move. They're doubling down on what they do well. Kevin O'Connell is doubling down, adding to the weaponry on the offensive side. And for a 6-1 Minnesota Vikings team, that I get it, they're winning some close games that they maybe shouldn't have won, but they're still 6-1. They're finding a way to win those close games, and now this is just we're in it to win it in the NFC, in a conference that's wide open right now, in my opinion, outside of maybe the Eagles being the favorite. So, yeah, I really love that move for the Minnesota Vikings. I think you have to include the Miami Dolphins as a winner in this trade deadline. Now, giving up the first-round pick for Bradley Chubb, some would say that's a little much. But in my opinion, you were a defense that was playing way too aggressive on the defensive side of the football. It's been working some, but when you look, their ability to create pressure with just 4 guys, they're only having a sack rate of about 3.3% when getting to the quarterback when they rush just 4. Now, when they've been blitzing, they've been a heavy blitz defense. That sack rate goes up to about 9%. But they've been allowing some big pass plays down the field when they blitz. So in my opinion, this is huge just in the fact that across from Jalen Phillips, who's another bigger type edge rusher like Bradley Chubb, this will help, in my opinion, the Dolphins create pressure with just their front 4 and drop into coverage with the rest. Because if you look at the recipe for success against some of these elite quarterbacks in the AFC in the playoffs, you've got to be able to create pressure with just that front 4 or 5 guys. You can't be blitzing all the time. So getting Bradley Chubb and then also getting the 49ers running back, Jeff Wilson, after you trade away Chase Edmonds. He was basically an expendable asset for the 49ers after they got Christian. So I love getting him for a pretty decent value. So if you look at what the Dolphins are doing, they've pretty much been a team that's flipped its identity or who they're going to be like every 4 or 5 months. Last year they were rebuilding, and they went for it with Tyreek Hill and the whole draft day trade, and now they're going for it again with doubling down on the defensive side and offensive side of the football. So pretty impressive what that Miami front office has been able to do, turning that who was it? The Laramie Tunsil trade, and then also the trade with the 49ers. They've turned all these picks into Tyreek Hill and Bradley Chubb, some impact players, along with Jalen Waddle through the draft. They're really doubling down on going for it this year. So I loved what the Dolphins did. And then I have to talk about ultimately what the Bears did. I actually really liked what the Bears did. They got, in my opinion, they were spending too much money on the defensive side. Weren't really in a position to pay Roquan Smith, so they give him away to the other conference, to the Baltimore Ravens. They get some draft capital in a second-round pick, and I believe it was a fourth or a fifth-round pick for a stud linebacker who's made second-team All-Pro, I believe, the past 2 seasons, who will ultimately help the Baltimore Ravens and be an impact player for them. But you get draft capital, and then you also, after seeing some encouraging signs from Justin Fields the past couple weeks, you go get him help at the pass catching position with Chase Claypool, who I think can be a better fit in this offense with what they want to do than he was with the Pittsburgh offense.
Right.
So I loved doubling down on your belief in Justin Fields. It's ultimately what you have to do. And by not ultimately having to pay Roquan Smith, you can now go out in free agency with all your cap space and get Justin Fields help. You got to be able to see if he's able to be the guy. But in order to see that, you have to surround him with the necessary pieces. And I think this was a good start for the Chicago Bears. I don't love giving up their own second-round pick. If it were me, I would have given the pick you got from the Ravens, the second-round pick from the Ravens. But that's ultimately what it took, because if you look at the rumors, Green Bay also had their second-round pick on the table for Chase Claypool. But the Steelers ultimately decided to take the Bears pick because they think the Bears pick was ultimately going to end up being higher than the Packers pick. So I love what the Bears did. I know losing Roquan Smith sort of sucks, but your defense will be fine. You can go out, get another linebacker in the draft this year. With all your draft capital and your assets now, I think it's lining up to get Justin Fields the necessary help that he needs. And I think that trade was sort of a win-win. For Pittsburgh, you now have projected three draft picks in the top 20, or not in the top 20, in the top 50. And for the Bears, you get Justin Fields a little help. So sorry for my long spiel. Those are my three winners for the trade deadline. So why not you give yours, and then we can talk about losers.
Well, you touched on it. My first big winner is the Baltimore Ravens. I just think the linebacker position, it is so hard to draft and develop a linebacker in today's NFL because linebackers are asked to do so many different things. They're asked to run fit, guard these shifty running backs out of the backfield, tight ends, whatever the case may be. They're really asked to do everything out on the football field, run sideline to sideline, make plays. And to bring a guy in who's already at that level, and the reports right now are saying that he's going to come in and be their play caller right out of the gates, right away. And I just think having that guy who's going to command the respect and accountability of everybody on that defense is only going to work wonders for a defense that has already been trending up. And to me, the biggest winner within the Ravens defense is Patrick Queen. He's already been trending up. He's already been playing better. And now, that some of that pressure is kind of taken off him in a way, I think. And now he's just going to be able to do what he does best. Just go out there and make plays. Just let him go run for the football. And Roquan will be behind you to cover you up. So I think it's a great trade for the Ravens. Whether or not, it's going to be worth the contract they're about to pay him, it's up in the air. But I think that's the argument for the Bears side, Matt Eberflus. I think Eberflus just left a situation where he did pay a guy like Darius Leonard at the linebacker position, who is very much a elite linebacker, but it's arguable whether he's worth that $20 million price tag in terms of impact each and every game. So I think from that perspective, I think Eberflus believes that he can plug and play a lot of different guys into that spot and still get good production. And I don't fault that thinking at all. I think that's fair to say. My second winner is the Miami Dolphins. I think the move to bring in Jeff Wilson hasn't been talked about enough. This is an offense that, under Mike McDaniels, running this, 49ers style system, being able to have that play action be as effective as possible is vital for this offense to work, especially with a guy like Tua Tagovailoa, who's kind of in that point guard role. First read hit him, second read hit him. Having the linebackers pull in on those play action plays is very, very important for the um, for the efficiency of that offense. And then on the defensive side, bringing in Bradley Chubb, I think a first round pick. I mean, it's arguable whether that's a little bit much for a guy who hasn't been able to stay healthy throughout his career, but I think um, this team is on the fringes of being a Super Bowl contender. I think they're a team that's kind of, in the tier with, I'd say, the Ravens, where if things bounce their way in a playoff game, I would not be surprised if they made a deep playoff run. So adding those moves on the edges for a defense that's ranked 23rd in the league because of how much they blitz, adding a pass rusher to that front four to where you won't have to blitz as much is a really underrated move. So my third winner is the San Francisco 49ers. And, I've given a lot of thought about that, Christian McCaffrey trade. It's a lot to give up, yeah, but this is a team that believes they're ready to win a Super Bowl, and I'm right there with them. I think they're ready, and it feels like to me what he adds to this offense is a lot more valuable than just trading for a running back. What he's able to do coming out of the backfield and what he's able to do, in screen game, just giving him those manufactured touches and having that ability to create out on the edge in space really puts fear into the defense. And I think that paired with what Deebo Samuel can already give you is going to be absolutely lethal. And we haven't even seen that yet. Deebo was hurt last week. So moving forward for the Niners, I think this is where they make their push for the playoffs, like kind of like how they did last year. But I think this version of the Niners offense will be better than what it was last year. So um, those are my three winners. I think we were kind of on the same page there with that Bears trade, with those Bears moves. I would say I think they were the honorable mention. Um, they were close to being that third team ahead of the 49ers, but I just think the impact Christian McCaffrey is going to give for the Niners in terms of moving the needle this year is why I gave them the edge.
That's fair. I didn't really include the 49ers because we already talked about that McCaffrey trade. We know that's a huge
That's
victory. That's sort of implied. And I think what the Vikings are doing, they just keep on winning. They're not really being talked about enough. Adding a guy like TJ Hawkinson to that offense as another piece. You can never have enough pieces on the offensive side of the football in today's NFL, in my opinion. I think it's going to ultimately work out great. Now, we'll see what happens these upcoming weeks. But I do think, when we think about losers, this is where the conversation becomes fun, in my opinion. The team that really stands out is the Green Bay Packers. And I think that's pretty much what everyone is talking about is, this Green Bay Packers team and their failure to get Aaron Rodgers a legitimate threat at the wide receiver position. Now, these complaints date back to last year and even the year before that. And those complaints were surrounding Davante Adams. Those complaints were related to surrounding Davante Adams with secondary options, having not only Davante Adams, but secondary options as well in the pass game. Not only did they trade away Davante Adams, who was their pass game, but they failed to go out and add help at the trade deadline. Now, that's not to say they didn't try. We've seen the rumors about getting Claypool, and maybe there were some others as well. But you got to, at this point, when you're 3-5 and your receivers are tied for fifth in the NFL in drops, tied for the most fumbles after they catch the ball in the NFL, and you're rated by Pro Football Focus as the 26th best receiving core in the National Football League. And when your top two receivers against the Bills on Sunday night were ultimately a 4th-round pick and a 7th-round pick in Romeo Doubs and Samori Torrey, I think is how you say his name. Both guys have been solid, especially Romeo Doubs, who looks like a pretty damn good player, but that's just not good enough in today's NFL. So what are you doing? In my opinion, Minnesota got better. I think Chicago got better. And I believe they have the same record as Green Bay. And Green Bay stood still once again. They failed to go out and get the pieces that they need to ultimately, become a better team and start to look to win Super Bowls. Because when they signed Aaron Rodgers to that contract, that's what they were supposed to do. Now, I do think the positive for Green Bay is I do think that they found something in that running game, and maybe, just maybe, they'll end up being a run-first team for the last half of the season, and that will help them. They were able to run for over 200 yards against a very good Buffalo defense. Maybe that will open up the passing game. But at the end of the day, you had to go out and add a weapon. Maybe they still go out and add an Odell Beckham Jr. I don't know. I don't know what's out there on the wide receiving market at this point, but I'm not quite sure what Green Bay is doing. That's the biggest loser, in my opinion, the trade deadline. We can go back and forth here. Who's your biggest loser? Is it the Green Bay Packers, or do you have another team you want to talk about?
It's absolutely the Green Bay Packers. I'm right there with you, but to me, it goes deeper than that. I think this is a philosophy problem in Green Bay. This is a team that is very old school in the way they run their team. They don't make many free agent signings. They don't really make many trades at all, not even in the NFL draft for the most part, unless it's to move up for a very particular guy. And it's pretty rare at that. I just think the philosophy is off. And they kind of treat team building like it's 1992, to where you're not being aggressive. You're not, making the moves needed in the moment to go get the best football team you can make. And that's really just where the question comes in. If this is what you were going to do, why re-sign Aaron Rodgers? Because this team, this offense, if you look at how young they are on the edges, if you look at the supporting pieces in the passing game, this is a group that you would see next to Justin Fields or like Trevor Lawrence or a young quarterback. These are young dudes, and they don't fit the window that Aaron Rodgers is trying to have here, which is Super Bowl now or bust. So right now, it's just a question of whether the philosophy is really matching up with like the goal of this team, which is winning a Super Bowl this year. And I just really question their aggressiveness. I mean, why not trade? Why not trade? You know, future picks when you can go try to get this right now. So it's really just a philosophy issue to me, and it goes way deeper than just Brian Gutekunst. It just goes to the organization as a whole, their entire mindset.
Yeah, I was really the biggest loser to me. I mean, there were some other per se disgruntled receivers and offensive weapons that were not happy in their respective situations that didn't ultimately get out of their respective situations. You think about Brandon Cooks, who was another guy that was on the block but didn't get traded at the deadline. I think mainly due to his $18 million base salary. I don't think there was another team that was willing to take on that money, but he ultimately remains the best receiver on a last place Texans team instead of finding a new home with the playoff contender. You look at what the Rams did, standing pat the deadline, a team that I think could have used some help for where they're at, but ultimately don't have the, for whatever reason, didn't have the urge to make a move. Cam Akers in particular has been unhappy for quite some time. Rumors he might be able to find a new home, but ultimately didn't. Kareem Hunt is frustrated in Cleveland. That's another guy I think about. There were just some disgruntled stars or really good pieces out there that I think didn't find new homes, that ultimately it was out of their control but ended up losing at the deadline because they didn't get traded. And then I think, the Broncos. Arguably the only positive for the Broncos this year has been the play of their defense. And the unit just ultimately lost their best pass rusher. Now you get a first-round pick for it, which is great, but you've basically told the team at this point that you're selling on the season. That's basically what it seems like to me. Bradley Chubb, a guy with however many sacks he has, leading the team in sacks. You've paid Randy Gregory big money. You did make a move to pick up another guy from the Jets after you traded Chubb, but to me, it's just not great for Denver right now as you lose your best player on the defensive side of the ball, at least in that front seven. But you do get a first-round pick, so can't really fault them there for doing that, but it's just the messaging, I guess, to that Broncos team. I don't think that sends a great message.
Yeah,
I don't know. Do you have any other?
Real quick? It's an interesting conversation. I actually looked at it a little bit differently. I think you look at this Broncos front and you look at what Browning has been able to do, their pickup from this summer. He's been one of the best defensive ends in the game this year, which is not what I don't think that's what they were expecting. And I think they wanted to also give Nick Bonito more opportunity, their pick from this year as well. But I 100% get what you're saying there. That's it's definitely questionable in terms of that defensive side of the football is the heart of their football team. So I think in terms of losing a leader within that locker room, I think that's definitely where it makes the biggest impact, in my opinion. But ultimately, I just don't think they wanted to pay Bradley Chubb the price tag that he was looking for, and it was going to be pretty steep. He's a guy who's hasn't really, been able to stay healthy. I mentioned that when I was talking about the Dolphins. He's a really good player, but in my opinion, he just hasn't quite lived up to the fourth overall pick status, which is, it's not fair, but that's kind of where I'm at with Bradley Chubb. I see him as kind of a tier 2 pass rusher. I don't see him as a alpha pass rusher per se. Number 1 pass rusher is a better word.
Well, I don't necessarily disagree with that. I don't think he's a tier 1 pass rusher, and the fact they were able to coop the return they got for Bradley Chubb is a big win,
Right.
in my opinion. And look, if you don't want to pay him, that's fine. You ultimately had to trade him and get something in return. And no, I don't think he's ultimately deserving of this huge deal. at the end of the day. But at the same time, I just don't think when you were a team coming into the season that had these expectations is falling flat on your face. I just didn't expect. I guess a first round pick was too good to pass up for them, and that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. And you went a little deeper there with, the guys who have stepped up. Getting a young guy like Nick Benito more playing time makes sense, I guess. So, but I just don't love the situation in Denver right now.
I understand that for sure.
So, with that being said, is there anything else we need to mention before we move on? I did want to mention a couple periphery moves. The Chiefs adding another weapon in Kadarius Toney. That's a move I think is going very underrated. And then also what the Bills did went kind of under the radar, but adding a pass catcher out of the backfield in Nyheim Hines from the Colts for relatively cheap, I think was a pretty good move for the Buffalo Bills. A guy that can come in on third downs, catch passes out of the backfield, be used in different ways, has been really good in the red zone this year. Take a little bit more pressure off of Josh Allen and those running backs in Buffalo. I think that was a under the radar, not necessarily a great move, but something that I think will end up helping the Bills for relatively low risk. And then Kadarius Toney was another one. The Chiefs just continue to add complementary pieces to this receiving core and offense that was already really good. And I think when you pair a guy like Kadarius Toney with a play caller like Andy Reid with some of the other skill sets that they have in that wide receiving room, it just adds to the depth and variability and skill set in the Chiefs receiving core. It makes them all the much more scary if Kadarius Toney is healthy.
Yeah, and Kadarius Toney, what makes that move scary is we haven't seen, him play truly healthy yet. And with a starting quarterback in the lineup when he's playing, if you look at what he was able to do last year, that was mostly with Jake Fromm at quarterback. So pairing him with Patrick Mahomes is absolutely scary, especially since he's a guy who many kind of compared to Deebo Samuel in a way. Not really, maybe not quite a Deebo Samuel, but kind of in that mold of a guy who can really make plays after the catch. And putting that into this Chiefs offense is scary.
Right. So I think that's going to wrap up our discussion on the trade deadline. We're about 55 minutes. So we got about 20 minutes here at the most for NFL picks, as we want to try to keep this to about an hour, 20 minutes. So let's move on to NFL Week 9 picks, and we'll start in Atlanta. The 4-4 division-leading Falcons host the 4-3 Los Angeles Chargers from the AFC West. The Chargers -3. So who you got and why?
I see this as a really interesting matchup just because of how the Falcons run the football and how physical they play. And on the other side, you have a Chargers team who comes off a game where they gave up 170 yards to rookie Kenneth Walker in Seattle. So this Chargers run defense is really going to be tested here. But on the other side of things, I think where the Chargers have the edge here is they're getting their pass catchers back. They're getting Keenan Allen back healthy after a bye week. Mike Williams I think, will be out, but they have their can't think of their third guy's name. I think his name is Hudson or something like that. But he's been solid this year as well in place of Keenan Allen. So I think this Chargers passing game is where they're going to have the edge. This Atlanta secondary outside of AJ Terrell has been not great. So I think that's where the Chargers can take advantage. And until I looked at the line, I was kind of feeling good about maybe picking the upset here. But since the line is pretty small, I'm actually going to take the Chargers to cover the spread here.
I agree with you. I think you hit it right on the head. It's a really good, interesting matchup of teams who, in my opinion, whose strengths are the others' weaknesses. You mentioned the Falcons' running game, especially on early downs with Marcus Mariota. They are sixth in the NFL with 27 runs of 10-plus yards on early downs, which means first and second down. They run the ball really well on first and second down. They're sixth in the NFL in terms of runs of 10-plus yards on those downs. And the Chargers are 29th in EPA per play versus early down runs in the NFL. So they're not very good against early down runs, and the Falcons are a really good early down running team that opens up the pass game. On the other side of the ball, you mentioned the Chargers getting Keenan Allen back, which is going to be huge, and I think the difference maker in this game. But this Chargers offense, what they do is they like to create third and short situations. Third and 3, third and 4 or less. Their 33rd and short conversion attempts lead the NFL, and this Falcons defense ranks 27th in the NFL in terms of opposing team third down conversion rate. They're allowing third down conversions 65.8% of the time in those situations, and that's where I think the Chargers are going to kill them. So I do think the Chargers will find a way to win this game, coming off a couple embarrassing losses at home to Jacksonville and Seattle. I think Justin Herbert is only getting healthier by the week, and I think the Chargers, with their weapons coming back, will find a way to end up winning this game. So they'll win and cover the spread.
All right. You just got to keep from charging. Okay. Next game here. Indianapolis Colts at New England Patriots. Patriots favored -5.5. Who you got?
Man, we saw the reason I picked this game is, number one, I was impressed with the Patriots' performance last week as my lock of the week, their ability to go in and beat the Jets for the 13th consecutive time. Mac Jones did some good things in that game. And secondly, for the Colts' perspective, you lost a game last week that you really should have won. You had some failed attempts in the red zone, some turnovers as well that really cost them that game. And so if you're the Colts right now, you're sort of in that group of teams in the AFC, along with the Patriots, in my eyes, that's going to be competing for like that 6 and 7 seed in the AFC, or at least they're going to have a chance come the end of the season. This is a really important game, or could end up being a really important game in terms of tiebreakers against common opponents in the AFC. So if you look at what Sam Ehlinger was able to do, he showed some good. There was also some bad. His offensive line this Colts offensive line just hasn't lived up to what I expected it to be ever since they, were talked about early on last year as a great offensive line. They had some injuries, but they're just not opening up the sort of holes, not having the success in the running game. Jonathan Taylor hasn't been near as effective as he was last year. And I do think, even though Sam Ehlinger showed some good things down the field with his arm and, running the ball, which is ultimately what his strength is, I think this Bill Belichick defense against young quarterbacks, we know what they're able to do. This game is in Foxborough. It is November now. It might be some chillier weather. With the Colts' inability to run the ball effectively or consistently, and with a young quarterback and a Colts receiving core that, outside of Michael Pittman Jr., has struggled to find consistency, I do think I lean the Patriots to win this game. I do think they're the better team. But I'm just not sure. 5.5 seems pretty big to me. So I'm going to pick the Patriots to cover, but I'm gonna take the Colts. I'm going to pick the Patriots to win, but the Colts to cover. Are you there? Hello? Okay. Well, we might be missing Imy. Not sure where he went. But as I said, I'm going to take the Colts to cover the spread, but the Patriots to win the game. If you look at what the Colts have been doing, they're not a team that blitzes a whole lot. Matt Jones has really struggled against the blitz, but I just think with the Colts' inability, or not inability, but their tendency to stay away from the blitz, Matt Jones will have time to throw. He'll make the necessary plays in the pass game, but the Colts will find a way to keep this game close, as the Patriots aren't a necessarily high-powered offense, in my opinion. And I do think the Colts can stand up to their running game. So I do think that the Patriots will win at home against a young quarterback, stay in this AFC East race, and further distance themselves from the Colts in the AFC wildcard race. But I think that the Colts will cover the spread. So I got to see where Imy is real fast. It's give me a second. Okay, well, Imy is currently restarting his computer. He's having some technical difficulty right now. So just to be clear, I have the Chargers -3 to win and cover against the Falcons on the road, and then I have the Patriots to win, but I think it's going to be a possession game, more of a field position type game, and I do have the Colts and Sam Ehlinger's second start as quarterback with some experience under his belt to be able to clean up some of the turnovers, some of the issues in the red zone to keep this game close enough to where it's keeping your attention late in the game. So while I wait around for Imy, I'll go ahead and just move on to the next game that we had, which is going to be the Seattle Seahawks at the Arizona Cardinals -2. We all know what Geno Smith has been able to do, being smart with the football, not turning the ball over, having success, building chemistry with the Seattle wide receivers, and then the success of Kenneth Walker, as Amy mentioned, on the ground, ran for over 170 yards from scrimmage against the Los Angeles Chargers last week in a convincing victory. But it's really been, in my opinion, the Seahawks' young defense. They've been much improved as of late since week 6. Their defense ranks third in EPA per drive and points per drive allowed, as well as forcing 3 and outs on 35% of opponents' possessions. Emmy's back. I was just continuing on with my pick for Seattle and Arizona real fast, and then we can come back to you with your New England pick and your Seattle pick. I was just really talking about how I think, number one, New England is going to win, but Indianapolis is going to cover. I do think they'll clean up some of their turnovers and red zone issues, find a way to keep that game close. But if you look at what the Colts do defensively, they don't love to blitz, and that's where Mac Jones has really struggled this season, is against the blitz. So I'll really be looking to see if the Colts decide to implement the blitz against this Patriots team and sort of change things up defensively. I do think they can stand up to that running game of New England, but I just think Mac Jones, or not, Bill Belichick against young quarterbacks. He's proven it time after time. They'll find a way to win. But I think it's going to be closer than some people think. And I was just saying how impressed I am with the Seattle defense, what they've been doing the past 3 or 4 weeks. Everyone wants to talk about the offense and what Geno Smith's been doing. But this defense, they're young. Adding Tariq Woolen has made a huge difference in the secondary, along with Kobe Bryant. Since week 6, they ranked 3rd in points allowed per drive and EPA per drive. And they're also forcing 3 and outs at the NFL's 9th highest rate in that time period. And they've already beaten the Cardinals this year. This game is in Arizona. It is a road game. Arizona is a team that is coming off a bye week, but I think Seattle's the better coach team. I think they're the more talented team defensively. They're hot. They're playing well, and I think they're going to win outright and, in turn, cover the spread in this game. But I'll turn the floor over to you.
Yeah, thanks for covering that. That was a unexpected technical difficulty there, but yeah, I'm gonna pick the Colts to cover the spread, just because I like what I saw from Sam Ehlinger last week, but I don't feel great about it against this Bill Belichick coach team, where Bill Belichick, we know his track record against young quarterbacks. Um, I don't have the stats right in front of me, but we've talked about it before on this show against rookie quarterbacks, against quarterbacks making their first few starts, like I'd say within their first 5 starts playing against Bill Belichick, their numbers are putrid. So I am a little skeptical about that pick, but I am going to stick with the Colts to cover just because I trust that Colts defense to hold their own, and I don't think the Patriots offense is explosive enough to blow anyone out at this point. So I'm going to stick with that. And then Seahawks and Cardinals, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. For that game, I really do think Seattle's being disrespected there. Arizona, they got DeAndre Hopkins back, and for a week it looked like their offense was really humming, and DeAndre Hopkins has looked fantastic. But on the other side of things, I think the Seattle Seahawks team is legit, particularly on the offensive side of the football. And defensively, they figured some things out and been able to limit some of those big plays that they were giving up early in the season. So at this point, I think the Seahawks are a legitimate playoff team, and I still have questions about the Cardinals. So I'm going to go with the Seahawks to win that game. And I feel pretty good about that. I just think the Seahawks at this point, I trust them more to make the winning plays late in the game.
Yeah, I do too. And that defense to me has been really fun to watch the past couple weeks. And I think they match up fairly well against the Cardinals offensively. Our next game, sort of a gut check game in my opinion. The Rams at the Buccaneers. This is the 4 p.m. window before we get to the Sunday night game. Tampa Bay -3 at home. I do think it's a little more urgent for the Rams than the Buccaneers, just because the Buccaneers, even if they do end up losing this game, they'd still have a fighting chance in an NFC South division where things are just changing on a week-to-week basis. There's no real runaway candidate right now. And then the Rams, who could really set themselves back with another loss here, not only just within their division, but in the wild card race as well, if you're hoping to get a playoff spot. And it doesn't help that Cooper Kupp missed practice yesterday. He's dealing with an ankle injury. And if he doesn't play, it seems quite impossible to pick the Rams. But at the same time, I look at this game and you have a Rams team that, they're still scoring a lot of points when Cooper Kupp is healthy, but 18% of their possessions right now have ended in turnovers. That's by far the highest rate in the NFL. And they haven't been able to generate a run game like they were able to last year on a consistent basis. They're shooting themselves in the foot way too much. But at the same time, Buccaneers look lost. They have a banged up defense that doesn't get any better from week to week. Um, they at the same time can't run the ball themselves. Brady doesn't look great. Dealing with a lot of injuries on the offensive line and at receiver, and his numbers with Mike Evans are way down from the past 2 years. If you look at his touchdown rate when targeting Mike Evans the past 2 years, 2020, 11.5%, last year, 12.3%, and then this year, all the way down to 5%. So I think in a more desperate situation, in my opinion, the Rams are going to step up and they're going to win this game on the road to get themselves back into the good graces of their fans, but also back into the conversation for the NFC playoff picture. I just have a feeling they're going to pull the upset. So I'll take the Rams.
Yeah, I'm right there with you.
But that all goes. I think that all goes. I'm not very confident about that, especially if Cooper Kupp does not play. But go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to pick the Rams to win as well, but I think for different reasons. I think, yes, they are desperate, but I also just think this feels like an Aaron Donald game. If you look at what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are bringing to the table from an interior offensive line standpoint, um, outside of Shaq Mason, who's a former Pro Bowl player who hasn't really been playing that great this year, but um, besides him, you really don't have that much you're bringing to the table in terms of keeping a Aaron Donald at bay. So um, I think with Aaron Donald being as dominant as he is, I think this is a game where we'll look back at it and he hasn't been, I guess, as game wrecking this year, but this will be, I think, a game wrecker game for Aaron Donald, in my opinion, especially with how immobile Tom Brady has been within the pocket this year. He's been a little bit jumpy with his footwork, and I don't think that just goes away. I think that just comes with having an offensive line that's been struggling, and I think that's kind of been in his head, which isn't really typical for Tom Brady, but that's not something that goes away easily, especially when you're playing a guy like Aaron Donald, who is one of the best to ever do it. So I think this game is going to be won on the defensive side of the ball for the Rams. And I think whether Cooper Kupp plays or not, I think the Rams pull it out in a close one.
Okay. We'll move on to our last game, which is going to be the Sunday night game. The Tennessee Titans, the leaders in the AFC South, at the Kansas City Chiefs. This line is pretty damn big. But when you look at the Titans' quarterback situation right now, having Malik Willis in there as a starter as of right now, we don't know the status quite yet of Ryan Tannehill. But since this line just keeps going up and up and up, or it has been the past couple of days, it seems to everybody, including in Vegas, that it's going to probably end up being Malik Willis once again at the quarterback position. Now, what do you think when you think of the Titans? Well, they're going to obviously run the ball a whole lot with Derrick Henry, pound the clock, or run the clock, pound the ball inside with Derrick Henry, then that zone read, all that sort of stuff. We didn't see a whole lot from Malik Willis last week. They only threw the ball 33% of the time on early pass plays in 28 minutes of possession last week. He only threw the ball once in the second half. It was a lot of running. I do think, Andy Reid, famous for always winning after the bye week. He's been great after the bye week, but the Chiefs are only 9-13 in his time against the spread under Andy Reid as double-digit favorites, and they're 7-9 in such situations with Patrick Mahomes. So do I think the Chiefs are going to win? Do I think they're the better team? Yes. Winning at home in Arrowhead on primetime, yes. Do I think Tennessee can find ways defensively and with their run game to kill clock and keep this game relatively close? Yes, I do. So I'm going to pick – it's sort of the cop-out pick, but I'm going to pick the Chiefs to win, but I'm going to pick the Titans to cover the big spread. It's just a feeling.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, but I think this Titans team is a little bit better than people are saying right now. I think, um, you know, the high usage for Derrick Henry is kind of throwing people off a little bit. With the fact that he's averaging close to 30 carries a game the last 3 games, that's a little bit concerning, yes. But I think the story here for the Titans has been what they've done on the defensive side of the football. If you look at a guy like Christian Fulton, a guy who nobody is talking about, but is having one of the best um, corner seasons in the NFL. I think right now he's playing like a top 10 corner, which is saying a lot because there's a lot of good corners in the league right now. So this defense is really coming together. That front seven has been playing really, really well. But this Chiefs offense, I think, is just they're hitting their stride right now, and it's going to be tough to win a game like this with a young quarterback who is a little bit limited at the moment. So I think I'd kind of compare this game to that Green Bay game from last year with Jordan Love in there, kind of a low scoring affair, maybe a touchdown here and there late. I think will be the difference for Kansas City. But I think overall, Tennessee's defense will have a good showing and show how good they are. So I'm going to pick Kansas City to win, but Tennessee to cover. Right there with you, agreeing again. So, okay, I think that was the last game. But I did want to touch on the Bills Jets game, but I'm not sure if we had that on here.
Well, you can touch on it, but I just want to – we need to still declare our locks of the weeks.
Oh, right. Absolutely.
We've taken risks the past couple of weeks, but they've ended up paying off. We've been pretty good with our locks of the weeks the past couple of weeks. I'll have the updated numbers on our next football podcast next week. But for me, I look at a Seahawks team. It's a within-division rivalry. The Cardinals have DeAndre Hopkins back. They're coming off a bye. I get that. It's risky to pick these in-division games as they're often close and unexpected things do happen. But I just think the Seahawks young defense is playing all too well. I think they match up really well with the Cardinals front that's banged up on both sides of the ball. Pete Carroll has Geno Smith and the Seahawks team believing that they're really good, and I think they are really good. So I think that offensive coordinator that they hired, Shane Waldron, could potentially be if this continues, a candidate for a head coaching job. Who they hired he was the passing game coordinator for the Rams. He comes over to Seattle. They hire him, and they've really been able to use Geno Smith in the ways that make him successful. This offensive line, they hit on both those tackle draft picks, the guy from Minnesota and the guy, Charles Cross from Mississippi State. Kenneth Walker's a stud. They're running the ball, and this young defense is flying around. I'm going to pick the Seahawks to win outright as my lock week, and in turn they'll cover the spread. I just think the Seahawks right now can make the argument they're a top 10 team in football. I think they are.
Yeah, absolutely. You stole my pick, so I'm gonna have to pivot a little bit here. I'm gonna go with LSU as my lock of the week to cover that 13.5 point spread. That's a little bit of a cop out, I guess, because I really do think that game will be close. But I do still think there's a chance this comes back to bite me because Alabama's offense is really that good. So those are our locks of the week. You're taking the Seahawks. I'm picking LSU to cover. So Real fast, I just do want to touch on that Bills New York Jets game. Just because I do think it's pretty intriguing. The conversation around Zach Wilson right now. Um, I think I think this is a good chance for him to have a bounce back. If you look at what how the Jets played against the Patriots last week, it really was Zach Wilson that threw away that game. It wasn't really anything the Patriots were able to do, in my opinion, that put that game away. It was really just their inability to throw the football in any type of efficient way, and the um, not having Brees Hall really hurt as well. But I think what people are forgetting is I think Garrett Wilson is kind of working his way back into the offense as well. And they had just traded for James Robinson, so they didn't use him last week. So I think this week they'll be able to use him a lot more with having him in the system for a week. So I do think that game will be a little bit closer than people think, just because I think this Jets defense is legit. I think the numbers may not show it, but the last 4 weeks or so, 4 or 5 weeks, I think this Jets defense has played like a top five defense. And that might be a bit of a hot take, but I really like how this Jets defense plays. So we'll see what happens in that game. That'll be really interesting to see. But that's going to do it. Unless you got anything to add, I think that's going to do it.
Real fast. Real fast. Game 5, World Series tonight. Who you got?
Oh gosh. Man, I'm going to take the Phillies tonight. It just feels like kind of a back and forth series. I think ultimately it will get to a game 7 either way, but I'm going to have to take the Phillies to bounce back.
I think I agree with you, but I am looking for Justin Verlander to have a bounce back start. In my opinion, he's got to go at least 6 innings, and it's got to be 2 or 3 runs at the most. If it's any more than that, then people are really – this narrative is just going to start to with every start in the World Series that it doesn't go the way he wants it to. It's just going to keep on persisting, if you will. And it looks like he's not done yet. He's going to keep on pitching until he's not effective anymore. And he might get some more opportunities, in future years if he stays with the Astros or even goes to another team to pitch in the World Series. But this is a big legacy start for Justin Verlander right now, I think. And if he pitches well, the Astros certainly have a chance, but I do think the Phillies offense is way too good to be kept down at home for another night. But, man, Christian Javier, what a performance that was. Only the second no-hitter in World Series history. So
Unbelievable.
Unreal. From getting pounded the night before to a no-hitter. The series is not necessarily the particular games themselves are sort of playing out differently than I thought, but the series itself, just the momentum, back and forth, it's going exactly how I thought it would. So it's exciting.
Yeah, this series to me is kind of giving me like 2013 NBA Finals type of vibes, like where every game's a blowout, yet it seems destined for a game 7.
Yeah.
Well, we don't have to talk about game 6, but you get the point.
Right. Yeah. No, it's certainly a fair comparison. But with all that being said, make sure you like, subscribe, enjoy the World Series. We'll be back maybe tomorrow or this weekend for a basketball episode. Yep. And just like Steve Nash's tenure in Brooklyn, we are going. Peace out.
Peace out.